Victor, thank you for coming along. This is the third of a series of conversations that we've had. I think we're doing 4 of them prior to the UMFHA Honey Association's AGM. Our first one was on the licence agreement. The second one was with Dr. Terry Braggins on science. What is Mānuka Honey in relation to the scientific principles behind it, and what does it mean, and what makes it so unique? This conversation, and thank you for your attendance here, is about protecting the term Mānuka Honey. Not only the association, but the industry in general, we've had a lot of support towards this program, and we're virtually completing up one phase. And I'd like to sort of go back to the beginning of that phase, talk about your role, what's happened, and some of the principles behind that. So that's what today's conversation is. There's been a lot of commitment from the industry, a lot of investment and a lot of time. And our job is here to give them a bit of background about that phase. There's a new chapter that we're going into, and this is about the past, and thanking them for their support and where we've got to. Yep. So, Victor, first of all, your current role, what are you up to?
So I'm on the Mānuka Charitable Trust as one of the trustees. I'm also the chairperson of the commercial arm, which is Te Pito Limited. Te Pito translated just means the prow of the waka, so it's the one that's forging forward. So the conduit between the trust, which is representative of Māoridom, and the commercial aspects, which is the loan that we've received from the government. So sort of on both entities.
Yeah, and so what else are you doing?
Currently the Chief Executive Officer of one of the iwi up north, Te Aupōuri.
Yep.
Still involved with our honey interest back in Archipelago on the East Coast.
Yep.
The land block that we have is 350 beehives, but collectively we own about 2,000.
Yep.
And was previously General Manager of Archipelago Miri Limited Partnership, getting the landowners and the beekeepers, which we became the beekeepers end of the day.
Yep.
Trying to control the supply of our honey from our land. Got our own brand going, so I stepped away from that about 6 to 7 months ago.
Yep.
But still involved in the industry through Te Pito and the Mānuka Charitable Trust.
So, Ngāti Pro, what does it mean to you? What does it mean being from Ngāti Pro? What's it?
It's my cultural identity. So, when Māoris start talking, they always refer to their rivers and their tribe and obviously their mountain, which is Ikurangi. That's a clear identifier for us, but Ngāti Pro have been the people of the East Coast since the time our ancestors set foot on this land in Aotearoa. So we don't refer to ourselves as Māori, we refer to ourselves as Ngāti Pro,
yep,
which is our clear differentiator from the people from the East Coast, the place, first place in the world to see the sun.
Yep.
Very unique, and our Mānuka is also unique, with both its Mānuka honey and its oil properties, and to the East Cape. So proud to be Ngāti Pro, even though I'm working up north now and working with another iwi. It's always difficult working for your own. So going to work for another iwi is different, but challenging, but exciting.
Yep. So in my time with you, I've learnt sometimes the hard way, but all the positiveness and the values and where you come from as a person, from Ngāti Pro. I've learnt a lot about that in the last few years, and the importance of that. So the process we've gone through, I will say bluntly, if it wasn't for the support of yourself, if it wasn't for the support of Soweto Gardner, Les Stowell, Rob Murray, Bobby Leaf, there's a whole host of people. You've sort of championed a lot of them together, that if we didn't have that support, we wouldn't have got here today. Would that be a good statement?
Yeah, it's a pretty accurate statement. I was involved in the industry way back in 2000 when I worked for B&H. Phil Kasky was my first boss, and then it was my first time at Dr. Peter Molan around the time when we set up FMB Medical Honey Limited. But from a Māori perspective, looking at it, Mānuka is a Māori word, just like Kānuka, just like Rewarewa, and Tāwari and the other native honey. So it's a natural progression for us to sort of look at how we protect our taonga species and our treasures that have been handed down. So our creation story is a lot different. It's not about Adam and Eve and all that. It's about the separation, and Tāne Mahuta was like an integral part of the separation that led in the light, but gave rise to Mānuka through our genealogy. So that's why it's important for Māori as the guardians, the kaitiaki of Aotearoa, to protect all our taonga species, and Mānuka as well.
So, in short, if we didn't have your support and the support of all those other names that I mentioned, we wouldn't have landed in this space with a trust that will hold the guardianship of this gift under guardianship. So there's a clear statement in the beginning of today's conversation is about, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't get to where we are today. And that needs to be recognised in how we move forward.
It's been a long journey, John. There's been a lot of meetings, a lot of hui, and not a lot of dewey in the, the early part of it, but it has been trying to work with our people, because I have to balance both. I have to balance the industry's needs and also the needs of Māori. So without the support that we've got from the likes of the people that you mentioned previously, it would be a very difficult road.
There wouldn't be no road.
There would be no road. That is the bottom line.
That is the bottom line. Without that support, without working in partnership, we could not walk down this road.
Yep.
And the time you've given to help us go down that road, it's all been voluntary.
Yeah, it's all been voluntary. My wife keeps on reminding me of that, but I do it for the kaupapa and the purpose of trying to protect our taonga. It's the first one that's gone global, but had a lot of time, mate, and a lot of, frustration and other things that we've had to work through, but the end goal was to try and protect this globally. We've still got a long way to go, but we're there now to, especially with the resources that we've received, to move forward.
Yep. And we stuck to a certain golden rule at the beginning. I never rang you unless it was after 8 o'clock and before 5. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you broke those rules a number of times, but that's just the way it is, just trying to keep, all of us are passionate about this industry and Mānuka as our taonga. So, we put the hard yards in.
Yep. So the second part, we sort of touched on it before, then I want to sort of delve in with you, is the importance of this word. You touched on it before, but you also provided the group to say, hey, it's not a word like door or window or whatever else. It's actually got the mythology of the creation there and so forth. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, I remember being interviewed by the New York Times and the Sydney Morning Herald, and they said, hey, it's just a word. And I said, well, you may think it's just a word depending on which dictionary you look at. But from Māori perspective, it's, as Indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, this is our taonga. It has a creation story, which I mentioned before, the separation of Tāne Mahuta separated his parents, Ranginui, Sky Father, and Papatūānuku, Earth Mother, and then he had various unions that gave rise to all our native species, and one of them being Mānuka. And if we've got Māori listeners on the Zoom at the moment, ka moia Tāne Mahuta, ia tā Wakatora ka puta mai a Mānuka. So he had a union with Tā Wakatora that gave rise to Mānuka. So that's our beliefs, that's our values, that's our creation story. So it's more than the word.
Yep.
It goes back to the heart of us as a people. And when you start talking about that, you start talking about Indigenous rights, and we'll be fighting that, from Aotearoa, New Zealand's perspective. We won't be compromising that. So we're not giving that word to anyone.
Yeah, we'll get into a story around that in a minute. And the importance of language. Without the Māori language, which defines a culture through waiata, through song, through dance, through movement, and how it's expressed through art. Without the language, we really are suppressing our culture.
Yeah, I mean, it is all about all of that, John. So, it's in our traditions, it's in our mōtete or our karaki or our waiata, everything that we do, because we are an oral people. Mm-hmm. We didn't necessarily write things down, and in our images. So Tāne Mahuta, Mānuka, and all that sort of stuff. Mānuka had multiple uses before honey came about. Yep. So used it for a whole range of different things, from palisades to fishing. Using the grounding into a poultice and using it for other ailments in the body. So, honey came a bit later on. Yep. But I think, our ancestors knew the importance of the special plant. Then when you go back to the word itself, coming, back from our Polynesian roots, it's all there. So that's why we're protecting it and making sure that that people understand that it's just more than the word. There's a culture sitting on.
And as I think one of the most classic examples that I've seen overseas at the moment was the change from Ayers Rock to Uru, and the decision not to respect it and not to walk all over it. And so people may say, well, no, we've lost control of that. And there is no excuse because of the ills of the past not to change as they have in Australia, where, my comment is, you don't walk all over Uluru, please do not walk over any other language. So, just because we've done wrongs in the past doesn't mean to say we don't need to right them now and provide that sort of respect and understanding of the importance of culture and language. So that's also part of the journey we're going down. I remember once during this time we had a visit from, and we won't name names, but individuals from Australia that wanted to talk. And you were very adamant and over certain facts. And they said, well, we just wanted to come over, have a wee chat. But it was actually more than just that. They brought 4 CEOs and a lawyer. There was more than just a chat. And do you remember your approach to that?
Yeah, I posed the question to them, do they believe, Mānuka is a Māori word? And they said no. And I said, well, don't bother coming over. And don't bother, meeting up with Māori, because we would all share that same view.
Yeah.
So, I ended that conversation, and I understood they did come over, but they didn't meet with me. So, or anyone else that are of importance in Māori did.
Yep.
To progress that conversation. So that's where I thought the matter had ended.
Yes. So it's recognition that is non-negotiable, but it's also now that this trust is in place. There is a vehicle from which people can communicate to that has the rights to have some form of conversation, if at all. So now that that's set up, we're able to progress things a lot better in that space.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's the first of our taonga that's gone global.
Yep.
So that's important for us. And so we need to set the template or the foundation for any other taonga species that goes global. We do. So this is groundbreaking for Māoridom. Our intellectual property laws in New Zealand, our domestic laws do not cater for these types of things, trying to protect our tikanga essentially. United Nations is doing a better job, but we have to go to international court to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the domestic laws need to catch up. The GI's legislation around wine and spirits and things like that. So we're keen. The trust is there to benefit Māoridom and all New Zealanders that are obviously working in the honey industry.
Yep.
So we would obviously look at other native species that I mentioned before to try and protect it. It's just a vehicle.
Yep.
But then there may be other species that are not related to Mānuka or honey, and they also need to be protected.
So we've gone through this journey right up to now, this phase. We've reached an end of one phase. There will be other presentations about where we go to next. But this has enabled a lot of other opportunities, a lot of other doors to potentially open up.
Yeah.
And we need to be successful, first of all, in this important phase. So what do you think are some of the key steps or the outcomes that we've actually achieved over the last few years to get to this point?
Well, I think one of the learnings is to engage with especially our Māori people, really.
Yeah.
And because if you don't take them on a journey, they're the first ones to unstitch it.
Yeah.
And we found that out the hard way. One of the biggest areas to sort of slow their process down. So that's a learning.
Yeah.
And they have their rights in terms of the treaty, which we respect.
Mm-hmm.
But all iwi Māori around the country also have the same rights. So Mānuka is protected for everyone.
Yeah.
Not just a single iwi group.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a learning, but it's been a learning curve to understand how all the dynamics are played. With the science, and then you got the government's definition and a whole range of different things from a commercial perspective that impacted on us, and then from an iwi Māori perspective, you sort of look at it differently as the guardians for in New Zealand to protect this taonga. So, and then those marry up.
Yep.
So we got to, in terms of our consultation process with our people, that will be comprehensive, but we have to make sure that any model that we develop, for Māori, is robust but simple.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't want a model like the fisheries one, which take us 10 years of litigation. Don't want to go down that path. So yeah, just something simple that people can see themselves represented in that model.
Yep.
At the moment, we've got people that have been chosen from around the country, and because we had to set up, form follows function.
Yep.
So we'll work through that process, but it's aged me, I would say. It's been a process, that's for sure, and trying to learn and get all your phone calls at 9 o'clock at night, not before 7. And on the weekends, just to understand, how this game is playing out. I never knew about geographical indications prior to this, and certification trademarks. So it's been a steep learning curve for myself. And then trying to balance that and then take all the technical stuff that you're telling me and then being able to convey that to our people in a way that they can understand. That's been a challenge, but had to work that through.
So the big message here for me is, one, it's taken a massive team effort to achieve it and to get where we are today. And some of the other outcomes is that we've obviously seeked some money from the government. That's almost completed and done, based on 2 elements. One is the science and the other one is the legal. They go together. We keep on calling the mantra. So before we go any further, I wanted to get these questions not out of the way, but dealt with in terms of Mānuka being a Māori word. What does it mean in the trust? And to have some have that quite clear before we go and ask for any questions. So at any time, if anyone wants to either put their hand up or type in a question, you're more than welcome. But I wanted to have this first because it was the important part of the conversation without having to deal with questions from other people. That's the starting point. So what else do you see as some of the outcomes that we've achieved along the way?
Just the collaboration between all of us.
Yep.
That's been great. People have been driven by what we call the kaupapa, which is to protect the term, and then haven't really focused too much on the politics that sit around it. And because it's pretty clear that you're protecting the term Mānuka Honey is pretty clear. And then what actually results in the outcome of that, we got to work through their process. So, we have got a comprehensive science program. We've got all the legal stuff that we've been working through, and just trying to understand that has been challenging, as I say, because we've been to meetings that sit on the outside of all this, because we have to sort of keep our minds open to other things. The recent media attention, especially last year with the Australians, and then how they were pushing for the fact that it's just Mānuka so they can use it as well. A lot of Māori were upset by that, and we've had to work through that process, but we've also had to try and find the resource and to be able to get that done. So the conversation that you and I had was, Minister Jones, probably 18 months ago now, has resulted in us working through this process, which we only recently got signed off. It's taken a long time. A lot of people, a lot of government agencies that are, had their 5 cents worth in terms of how it should be shaped, and so that's been challenging in itself. How we have to work with others, because we got a pretty clear vision, but others sort of come in and not upset it, but they have their say and then shape it.
And one of the other, for me, outcomes is the industry has gotten behind us. All the other major industry groups have virtually signed up, have written to the minister. It's amazing that the current minister of primary industries had previously described the industry as cowboys. I personally think that it's not the greatest term in the world, but hopefully this process has actually changed his view that there is a united front, there is professionalism amongst the industry and a recognition of what needs to do and ability to actually work towards that. So for me, that's another outcome. And I think that outcome has been, one could say, rewarded, although we're not here to be treated as children to be rewarded for doing good things. We are here because this is a need. And the outcome of that has been particularly resourcing of a science program that just to run through it from my view, as I wrote the damn thing, it's there to ensure that it is Mānuka honey, that it is Leptospirillum scoparium, which is a key aspect, not any other leptospin, polythiolium, or navigate, whatever else, because that is misleading if you were to call it that it's not adulterated and that it comes from New Zealand. So there are requirements overseas, and an overseas legislative sort of process to say you are a competent authority, you can measure to that and you can protect that. So in market, you're able to provide a service that says you can protect this term Mānuka honey on those 4 fronts. So that's also one of the outcomes of being able to resource a science program to achieve that. And again, if we didn't have the trust set up, if we didn't have the industry commitment, if we didn't have this operating company, we would not be able to do that. So it's been quite an important process we've got to this stage.
People have to remember that the science is 20 to 30 years old.
Yeah,
it's been tried and it's been tested and everything. So when the minister or the officials made the comment that some of us were acting like cowboys, or the industry was cowboys, and I think the industry itself probably took an affront to that. But this was one of the issues that they all came in behind, and including Māoridom. So because Māoridom, especially with all the land, we hold a lot of Mānuka grows on our land, and so we're now making those investments. But nothing to rally the cry to call us all a bunch of cowboys, and it is at times it was a fragmented industry, but there's a lot of leadership in the industry as well. So and they stood up. So that's one of the key things by it. As a result of what we've been able to do so far, and as I said before, we've still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and it's also a recognition. This was an initiative from the UMFHA Honey Association. I think it's put in close to $1.5 to $2 million in legal bills to be able to get us to this point. And one of the key outcomes from that was, I remember receiving an email or a call from Ian Fletcher on December, I think it was 12, a couple of years ago, and he said the filing in the UK has been accepted, because we had to go through opposition even to get the filing in the UK. It cost us a lot of money. And the words from the adjudicator was 1, Mānuka is a Māori word. 2, it is a badge of origin that it comes from New Zealand. And 3, it would be improper for anyone else to use that term. So, that's part of the outcomes that was achieved. It was initially by the work of the association, recognising where this needs to land, recognising we needed to bring an industry together, recognising we need to work through you and the other people that I mentioned, particularly Sue Wera, the people like Lee Stowell, Rob Murray, Bobby Leaf and co. There was a lot of them that said, we're prepared to help and back you because we know where it's going to land. And in this interim phase, we're here to support you.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, because I know when we had the meeting in Wellington, when we got the findings and from the UK Intellectual Property Office, it dawned on me then that I was probably one of the only Māoris in the room.
Yeah.
And then the importance of that, as trying to represent Māori views, dawned on me at that stage, and then but at the moment we have a charitable trust that is with some fairly influential people that sit on it, so I've been able to bring all of those people on board to agree and work with us collectively for the betterment of the industry, but also for the betterment of our taonga species, Mānuka. So that's been pleasing. We've been able to get the representation that we currently have. It's a pretty impressive group.
It is.
And even our commercial board, we've got some smart people on there as well. So I think we've got the team to drive this forward. Very confident.
Fine. So I'd like to delve into some of the core principles around this. Now, I won't try and pronounce the Māori words, but what is the Māori term around the first key principle is about inclusive. We're taking everyone on board. It's an expression of commitment to the public good. So, people are saying, well, where was this trust? What is the first principle behind it? And that's the inclusive nature. What's the correct term behind that?
What have you got there?
What is it? Help me there, Victor.
Oh, it's kōtautanga, yeah. So that's about unity.
Yep.
Māori. So that's some of our basic values and principles by being inclusive and bringing everyone together. for the benefit of the whole. And in terms of that one there, you got the definition there in terms of the public good.
Mm-hmm.
Then the kaitiakitanga, that's stewardship. That's our guardianship role.
Yep.
So we take that seriously because we're only guardians, we're not owners.
Yep.
So that's our Māori set. Then you got the kia koi, which is professional execution. So that's why we brought in some of the people that we have on our trust and on the company. They are probably the leaders in their respective fields. So ki u ki te pai, remain proactive and ethically aligned to Māori values. So that's why you got the trust as the boss, and then you got the company, and a lot of these values will be in the trust deed. It'll be worked right across. And then you got whaidawa, which is look at the how we can create value.
Yep.
So those are our core principles in terms of the Mānuka Trust, which should emanate right across to the commercial.
And all of New Zealand.
And all of New Zealand should be adhering to the same values.
Yes, but particularly the inclusive nature of this and the guardianship model. So there may be people thinking, oh dear, who are these? What are these? What's the chance of being isolated out? The answer is, of all the documents we put together and all of the agreements, is this inclusiveness is the key and number one core principle written into the trust and written in the relationship.
Yeah, it goes without saying. We weren't here just to protect us for Māoridom, but it's for everyone.
Yeah.
And because as long as you're a honey producer from Aotearoa, New Zealand, then that's your badge of origin. You can use it, but there'll be certain rules that will apply.
Yep.
But those are the basic principles.
Yep. So two sides of the coin. Without Māori having this role, have the trust, we're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
But we can all have confidence. It's about inclusiveness, and it's not the ownership; it's the stewardship. It's the guardianship.
Yeah, ownership infers, that it's private property, that type of stuff. But for us, kaitiakitanga is about the guardianship role.
Yeah,
that we perform.
Yeah. So the first question I'm reading is from Barbara, and thank you, Barbara, for your support over the years. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much. How's the relationship with the MPI going? It's been tense in the past. Yes, it has been tense. In fact, almost like cowboys and Indians, really. But it is a far, far more healthier, more productive, and we have an agreement. And I met with MPI this morning. And reiterated, this is about the science. MPI is the regulator. We can't change it. They have that responsibility. Their regulation role involves science, but there are more aspects to it than that. However, we are in a far better, healthier space with them, working with science to achieve the agreed collective outcomes from this program. So the relationship's changed a lot, and maybe it's the leadership that has helped within both parties has helped that a lot. But no, the relationship has changed, and it's a lot more healthier. Would you?
Yeah, well, you made the point of the leadership changing. So, when the leadership did change, I think, the MPI are more proactive around a few things. So, but at the end of the day, it's the science program that we have is our science program.
Yes.
They perform the function as the regulator, which is fine.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's our science that will be driving. So they should be using best science to define things in the future.
You could say there was great wisdom by the minister when he signed off accepting our application, that he also added some money for an independent science advisor role.
Yeah.
So
we a very prudent approach.
Yes. So a wise man, one could say. The other question is the challenge is currently focused toward IP filing in China. What's the plan for the wider rollout? We actually filed in 5 countries right back in the beginning, 2015. Yeah. So we've actually we are doing more than China. We've hit all the major territories. We've also added Singapore, and so it's a constant rollout and challenge across all territories. And we have hit the 3 major ones: the UK, USA, and China. So it's more than just China.
Ian's available.
Ian. Fine. So we're now going to get down to the nitty-gritty and the dirty details. and I'd like to bring on board Ian Fletcher. Hello,
Hello.
Ian.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be on this call. John, what are you looking at me to cover in the sense of what have you covered so far?
The first part was Victor was covering the question of the trust, the guardianship models, the inclusive models, the journey we've gone through in getting here. So it's the past. As discussed, we're now heading into where are we exactly at with each of the territories? What are the instruments? The first question to you is, what are the instruments we're using to achieve the protection of this term, Mānuka honey?
Right, thanks, John. So the instruments we're mainly using at this stage are called certification trademarks. People will be familiar with a trademark which is of a conventional sort that protects a brand like Coca-Cola or OXO cubes or something like that. But we're using a different version of the same method of protecting a name, which is called a certification trademark, that protects a whole class of goods that meet a particular standard. So it uses trademark protection to act as an open standard. Anyone who produces, in this case, Mānuka honey, but the relevant good that meets the standard is entitled to use the trademark. And the trademark has to be administered by a commercially neutral body. So the Mānuka Trust is a really good long-term investment in creating an appropriately neutral body. If we had everything we wanted, we'd also look to protect the term Mānuka honey around the world using what are called geographic indications. Now, geographic indications protect food and drink from a particular place and a particular name. So the classic is champagne, but you can also think of Scotch whisky and other products like that, Welsh lamb, Parmesan cheese, etc., where the combination of the product, the name and the place are linked in a form of protection. That would be ideal for us. Mānuka honey fits into that kind of categorization brilliantly. But New Zealand law doesn't allow us to do it at this stage. New Zealand only protects wines and spirits as geographic indications. So until we can get that changed, we're using certification trademarks around the world. Where are we doing it? So think of 5+1. We're applying for a certification trademark in New Zealand, not because it's particularly important commercially, because honey can't be imported into New Zealand from almost all places, but because having a New Zealand mark gives us a kind of home base benchmark against which other countries judge us. And then we're applying in 5 commercially significant markets around the world. So that's China, the US, the UK, the EU and Singapore, which is an important kind of entrepot for Mānuka honey. And that's the kind of agenda that the original Mānuka Honey Appellation Society and now the Trust is committed to taking forward. So let me pause there, John and Victor, and see if that's helpful, if people have any questions, and then perhaps we can go on and look at the particular state of play and what the prospects are.
Yeah, can you actually take us through the process of filing, the process of getting it registered, the process of opposition, and the challenges? So if you can just give us a quick rundown.
So that's a real scholarship question. Explain important pieces of intellectual property law in 2 minutes.
Yes.
That's right. Okay, let me do what I can. So basically certification trademarks follow the same process that you would go through if you were registering a trademark for your own commercial concern, you know, the company that you own. And there are 2 stages. The first is whether the mark you've sought to register qualifies at all to be a trademark. So that is whether it meets what are called the formalities, whether it's capable of being registered as a mark. And that's a judgment between you, the promoter of the mark, and the trademark authorities in the country that any of the particular countries that we're talking about. And so if you overcome those, any disagreement there, they're called objections, they can be ultimately decided by the court, then the mark is registered as capable of coming into force, and it's open to objections called oppositions from companies who believe that they have an existing interest in the market, an existing interest in a competing mark that you're perhaps you're perhaps not reflecting the expectations of consumers correctly, etc. So that's a stage where you can be opposed by other commercial interests. So where have we reached? So we've got past the first stage, objections or meeting the formal requirements of trademark law in New Zealand and the UK. Actually, we did rather well. So we're now at the stage of dealing with oppositions. And as I was going to explain, we've got some serious and well-funded opponents. This is not a trivial step that we've reached. In the others, China, the EU, and the United States and Singapore, we have not got to the stage where the office objections have been overcome. So we're still in the process of dealing with those. The US and Singapore ones will probably wait to see how we get on in New Zealand. The Chinese and EU ones, which are commercially really important, are ones where we've got, an actual fight on our hands to convince skeptical trademark examiners in Beijing and Alicante, which is where the EU does these things, that Mānuka Honey is a genuine product that's capable of being distinguished in consumers' minds. We think that's obvious, but to trademark examiners around the world, that's an exercise we still have to go through.
Can you explain some of the challenges we face, particularly over it's descriptive or it's not descriptive, which seems to be a fair chunk of the argument that's gone forward?
So in general terms, you can't trademark a word or a term which is merely a description. So you can't trademark the word car or the word big, and you can't trademark big car because that simply describes a product which any consumer would simply say, well, it's big and red or whatever. So you can't try and corner the market in adjectives. So because actually that would clearly be commercially bizarre. So you have to have a trademark which is capable of being distinguished in the minds of consumers from others, and with a product or service underneath it which is distinctive. And so our argument is that the term Mānuka Honey reflects honey from Leptospermum scoparium made in New Zealand, and other producers of Leptospermum scoparium honey for whom the word Mānuka has become a bonanza really, are trying to argue that it's simply a word that describes honey, and the word Mānuka has passed from being special to being a general description. We argue that that's not the case, but that's the kind of centre of really quite a difficult fight which we've got in front of us. I mean, trademark law is complicated. Well-resourced companies are able to trademark all sorts of things. The Coca-Cola company has trademarked the exact shade of red that they use, for example. So there's all sorts of arguments to be had around this, but essentially this boils down for us to considering the question whether in the minds of consumers we're talking about a product which is associated not just with Leptospermum scoparium, but quintessentially with New Zealand.
Which brings to the point, if we didn't put the filings in August 2015, the argument becomes harder as we move forward. And when we looked at the marketplace, we said in the minds of the consumer in the UK, what was in the market? And it was only one thing, and that was, and mostly is, or more than just mostly, that it was Mānuka Honey from New Zealand. So it had not been generically or taken over by anything else and become very descriptive.
So there's 2 points there, John. One is a simply historical one, and one's a very important point. The simply historical one is that the way international trademark law works, it's separate in each country, but it's harmonized by treaties around the world. You only have to prove the distinctiveness of your product at the date you file the application. So if the market moves afterwards, you don't have to continue to develop evidence as the market changes. You've only got to prove your point at the point where you file. And for us, this is this late 2015 set of dates. So that's really helpful because we don't have to keep on dealing with emerging competition as we go along. But the important point that underlies your question that I think is really useful to bring out for people is that we are looking to trademark the term Mānuka Honey, we are not looking to trademark the term New Zealand Mānuka honey, because we are arguing, and we believe we are absolutely right, that Mānuka honey can only come from New Zealand. And therefore, if we had the term New Zealand, we would be assuming and conceding that it's possible to have some other country Mānuka honey, and we don't admit that. And our fundamental argument is that this is, as you often say, a unique product in the literal sense of the word unique. There is only one. And we don't want to concede, because we don't believe it. We don't think it's true that there is a product called Mānuka honey that comes from any territory other than New Zealand.
So we're saying in the minds of the consumer, it only came from New Zealand.
That's right.
We're saying that the science behind it proves that it only came, that it is unique to New Zealand because of geographical so
John, I'm losing your microphone has gone wobbly.
Can you hear me now, Ian?
That's better.
Fine. Well, I'll leave it for you to answer. Besides the mind from the consumer, what other points of reference are we saying that this product is unique?
So we've got, as you've said, we've got the science, we've got the minds of consumers, we've got the clear reference, which I think we can demonstrate to the heritage of the term Mānuka, which Victor will have talked about and is much more qualified to talk about. But in the minds of consumers, we're bringing all of these components together, and trademarks are about heuristics, rules of thumb. In the minds of consumers, we think we can demonstrate, not just argue, but actually demonstrate that in the minds of consumers, the term Mānuka honey means Leptospermum scoparium honey from New Zealand, with all of its associated other qualities, scientific, biological, cultural and linguistic, and historical. And we bring that theme together, and we say in the minds of consumers, that's one idea, and it's appropriate to designate it and to protect it.
And we have gone to various companies and asked them for their marketing material prior to 2015 that has helped us demonstrate that, again, in the mind of the consumer, the sole item out there and the effort and the goodwill and the reputation was built up by New Zealand companies over this term. And that reach out to companies is really quite important in terms of the body of evidence.
That's right. So in the minds of, trademark law is a curious world, because it ultimately says what is the impact of this term or this mark or this brand in trade, meaning in the interaction between the producer and the consumer. And so what is in the consumer's mind at the point you present them with the product, and is it got such value that it's worth misleading them? We protect the term Mānuka honey because it's worth someone else trying to rip it off. It's not bog standard honey with a price that's related to the world price of sugar. It's a honey with special qualities that consumers have concluded is worth paying a great deal more for. Therefore, it is worth seeking to defraud them.
So I'd like to ask Victor first. What do you see the downside if we fail? What's the downside for you?
Well, in terms of us as a guardian, so we haven't protected it, so we haven't fulfilled our obligations as a guardian.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you look at it commercially, it's going to have a significant impact. Besides the definition, I don't think we can retain the premium status that we have for our Mānuka honey products out there in the marketplace. But Ian's correct. He's told us what those factors were, and I agree with every single one of them. And it is unique to New Zealand. So Aotearoa New Zealand. So yeah, that's how I see it, John, at the moment. So that's why, as a guardian of our taonga, we will be fighting this, but we're going to make sure,
Yeah. And Ian, where do you see the downside? Can you hear me, Ian?
Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I had a difficulty unmuting. Look, the downside is simple. As far as I can see, and I think you've produced the evidence for this in other work, John, for just about every other honey producer in the world, the long-term price of bulk honey is determined by the world price of sugar. So that means that all of the investment we've put into Mānuka, into beekeeping in New Zealand, into building the skills, building the floral resources, that is all at risk if we can't effectively protect the term Mānuka honey, because we would put ourselves in a position where our long-term future was dependent on the fortunes of Brazilian sugar producers, because they are the people who set the world price for sugar because they are the cheapest producer. And so that would be our fate. We would be a commodity-based price taker, as opposed to the owners collectively in New Zealand of an extremely valuable brand that set its own price and had its own direct, separate relationship with consumers who were prepared to give it a great deal of value and invest themselves in building their relationship as consumers with the Mānuka Honey brand that we believe should be the basis of our commercial relationship with those consumers. Look, a colleague of mine in a previous life once said to me, of the world's really great brands, consumers don't buy the product, they join it. Very important point. We want consumers to get to the point where they experience Mānuka honey in its full sense, reflecting its chemical properties, its biological heritage, its taonga status, its cultural value, its linguistic heritage. We want consumers to enjoy all of that, and we want to be able to give them the whole package. And that's not going to be a transaction based on the price of sugar.
And from an international perspective, I've always held the view that the work that's done here has a value for honey, or honeys from anywhere else in the world, the same as wine or the same as cheese or anything else. That from an international honey industry perspective, if we fail here, my view is that the downside is that the whole honey industry itself will not advance as it should in the same light as wine or cheese or those unique products. It is able to sell its story from its land or its people and its environment. And that we also have almost a duty to win based on enabling other countries or territories to do similar with their sugars and shift it out of this, or their honeys outside of that sugar price. And so across the board, I think it's really important.
I agree with that. I mean, if you look at wine's a good example. The wine growers of Bordeaux in France in 1855 classified their vineyards. They said, top, first growth, second growth, third growth, and so on. So they created a equivalent of the UMF quality mark for Bordeaux. And the rest of the world followed. That said, oh, look, you can actually describe wine in terms of good, bad, and ugly. And good wine will command a consistently higher price. And then people can build a brand reputation around Chateau Margaux, which is going to be fundamentally pricier than something, something red in a bottle from Argentina. And they created that whole sense that wine was capable of being broken up and described accurately. And the UMF quality mark has started that process, and protect the term Mānuka honey will enable us to continue that and entrench that and properly defend it around the world. Now, there's two consequences of that, John. Firstly, the defensive one. When in 1870, the phylloxera pest hit the vineyards of Bordeaux and they had to tear them all out, learn to graft them onto American rootstock and replant them, losing all of their production for 10 years, their reputation was such they were able to rebuild it in the face of what for wine growers was an extraordinary biosecurity hazard and biosecurity incident. And because they'd put the work in, they were able to protect the brand, and they still got the premium because they were there first. Now, we're in an equivalent place. If we can get in there first, we can shape the way the world honey market is described in terms of the quality of honeys, because we will be the Chateau Margaux of honeys, and that'll be a great position to be in. So if bad things happen, we'll be able to rebuild and protect. But if we don't do it, frankly, someone else will. Someone else will find a great honey somewhere, and they'll go, oh, look what those French guys did in 1855. Let's do that as well. And let's make our honey the Chateau Margaux. And those guys in New Zealand can be the red stuff in the bottle from Argentina. And that's the choice that we face. Be first, shape the market, be the people who create the category, and earn the long-term brand value that is long-term brand value takes work to protect, as you and I have spoken to the Scotch Whisky Association, fought 3,000 court cases since 1913. It's long-term hard work, but it's well worth it. That's the fight we have in front of us. If we don't do it, someone else will, and we will end up having to comply with their rules rather than be the people who write the rules. That's the fundamental opportunity in front of us now.
Thank you, Ian. So we've gone from, I look at it as one phase where this initiative came about from the UMFHA Conversations with great support from the industry, and particularly Victor and a whole set of colleagues. We're into another phase now where the money's been released, and that heads towards the Mānuka Charitable Trust and Patau, this is a changeover. This is a phase, and it just we have the responsibility to communicate back to those that have supported us, and we have a responsibility to continue that communication, this journey down. And I need to reiterate, have confidence, and the documents and the structures that you've helped a lot put together, Ian, over the inclusivity that it's inclusive for all New Zealanders. It's based on a guardianship model. And so we've been able, it's taken a long time, it's taken a hell of a lot of effort, but we've reached one phase and we're heading towards another. So there is a thanks and a communication that we are trying to achieve to give people the confidence of where this is going and the importance of it. So any final words from you, Victor?
No, you pretty much summed it up, John. And you know, what Ian's been talking about is bang on. So you know, we've still got a long way to go. You know, if there's other people that can certainly step up to the mark and carry this on, you know. But some of us have got some other things we need to be doing. But just remember this, you told me once, Ian, you know, success has many authors. So you wait till this starts going and then other people will start coming out of the woodwork. But,
right. I agree with that.
Ian, from you, any final words?
Look, two things, John. Firstly, we're not doomed to win. We've got a real fight ahead of us. There are people out there who've got money on the table, advancing the cause of, you know, honey they claim as Mānuka from other places, and you know they have invested in that, and they stand to lose a great deal by our success. So we're not doomed to win, and we need to have our house in order at home, which we now have, which is great. And we need to be organised, effective, and determined abroad. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, now that we've got the resources from the government, our position is immeasurably strengthened. One of the lawyers overseas that we've consulted on this had acted for a number of French wine regions in dealing with Australian wine producers many years ago. And his advice is when the other side believes you have deep pockets and you're determined to stick it out, then that's when they give in. And so we are now in a position where we have the institutional structure in New Zealand and the resources to begin that final push overseas to create the protection of the term Mānuka honey for New Zealand in ways that will give us, hopefully give us the benefits that we've been able to set out this afternoon.
Thank you. Victor, thank you. Unless there's any other questions that have come in, I'll just have a look. I don't think there is. That should do it. So that's the end of our third set of conversations. First one was over the license agreement. The second one was for science with Dr. Terry Braggins. This is the third one. It's a bit of an update, or a significant update on where we've got to, because this has been the major program for the UMFHA over the last fair few years. A lot of resources has gone into it. And the next one will be on the marketing position from UMF moving forward. So again, thank you, Ian, and thank you, Victor.
Thank you both. Thank you. Bye-bye.